This is Carolina This Week. Carolina This Week with Tim McGinnis.
Good morning and thanks for joining us for Carolina This Week. We're going 28 minutes commercial free talking about the new 56th State House District seat that's up for grabs. Two candidates running for it. Of course, District 56 is that one that includes Carolina Forest. It's brand new this year. Goes the whole way from Carolina Forest, where you would think of it as being Carolina Forest, from about Highway 31 up to around CCU, includes the Atlantic Business Center where we're broadcasting from. Goes over around Highway 22, Highway 31, Highway 90. It is a big district, and we got a lot of things to talk about this morning. The two candidates are both Republicans, both thrown off the primary ballot back in June, along with so many other candidates statewide. And they're with me this morning. Dennis DiSabato, an attorney who practices in Carolina Forest. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Tim.
Mike Ryle, a restaurateur here in the district. Thanks for being with us.
That's correct. Thank you.
Okay. The first question is going to go to Mike, and then Dennis, you'll have an opportunity to answer all questions except this first one. I'm going to try to ask you guys to keep it to about 1 minute. This first one you can have about 2 minutes for. Sure. I want to keep rebuttals to a minimum, so let's try to keep some of the attacks low-key today.
Okay.
And this has been a bitter contest. I don't have to tell either one of you about that. It's a volatile year where you were both thrown off the primary ballot. Mr. DiSabato, you sued Mr. Ryle to try to prevent him from being on the ballot, and we're just hearing now about allegedly some supporters of yours putting some flyers out that Mr. DiSabato contests and says that it contains false information. I want to let you speak to this first, Mr. Ryle. Why is this contest so heated? Why is there this animosity between the two of you?
Well, I don't know that there's animosity between the two of us so much as it is passion. I think we both believe in what we're doing, and we want to represent this district, and so we're going to work hard to do that. I do think it's unfortunate that we are trying to remove it from the hands of the voters and put it in the courts. You know, the Ethics Commission cleared my paperwork, the Election Commission cleared it and responded to Dennis accordingly, and then the courts did the same thing. And now, you know, we're hearing that there's going to possibly be an appeal, or that's still out there. And so I think the voters, as well as myself, need to know, is this something we're going to let the voters decide, or are we going to try to take this back in the courts?
All right. Mr. DiSabato, same question to you. Why the animosity? Why the lawsuit? Why is all this happening?
Yeah, again, I agree with Mike. I don't believe that there's been much animosity between the two parties so much as passion. I stand by the fact that I filed that lawsuit for the benefit of the voters of District 56 so that they could head to the ballots with certainty. We do not know what the next legal action is going to be because the order has not been entered of the record yet. Once it's entered of the record, we'll take a look at it and see what our recourse is. But my plan is to continue to just move forward with my campaign in a positive manner. I've done this all above board. I could have taken the Jake Knotts approach to the litigation and done it under cover of night and asked a supporter of mine to file it. But like all things, I wish to be transparent and completely accountable with it. And I put my name on the pleadings, and I did it as a voter of the District 56 on behalf of the residents of District 56 so that they can go to the ballots on November 6th and know with absolute certainty that both candidates who are on the ballot are there legally and certified.
Okay.
Well, if I could, I think that's been responded to. And what we're doing is wasting the voters' money. You know, each day we set in court is several $1,000s of their money we're wasting. The answers have been out there. This thing's been addressed, and I think it's time to move on. But that's going to be your decision.
And once the order has been filed and we take a look at it, and I'll discuss it with my attorney and we'll figure out where we're going from there.
Well, we do know that there's going to be an election on November 6th, and right now both of you are going to appear as petition candidates. So let's move on and talk about some of the issues now that we got that out of the way.
There's one other issue that I think we need to discuss, which is that piece that went out in the mail the other day and door to door, and I think it needs to be addressed.
How about I give you 30 seconds, and then Mr. Ryle, I'll give you 30 seconds for that.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
There was a piece that went out by an organization. It was purported to have been paid for by an organization by the name of FreedomWorks. When I received that piece, I saw that there were several Mr. Ryle's supporters, financial contributors going door to door hanging that piece on people's doors. I contacted FreedomWorks, and FreedomWorks disavowed it. They have no record of endorsing Mr. Ryle. They have no record of paying for the piece. We've done some digging. We found out that it's associated with a woman from Somerville, South Carolina. I don't know what she's doing in an Horry County election. And apparently she's associated with the 912 Project, which isn't associated with FreedomWorks. So I think we really need to figure out where this came from, who paid for it, are there any ethical violations that have been in place, and this is exactly the type of dirty politics that I think people in South Carolina and across the country are tired of.
That's about 30 seconds,
Okay.
a little over.
And I guess I'll do two things here. One is, I keep getting accused of doing things that are underhanded. And I'm willing to sit here and go over each one of those with you, including the fraud charges and everything else, in public so people understand what really happened versus hiding things. Okay, all the stuff that you've thrown out there hasn't stuck. And here's another example of that. And this just came out today. I was just sent a copy of it from Jackie Bodner, who's the press secretary from FreedomWorks. And she responded and says they are responsible for that piece. They did send it out. If you'd like, I'll read it to you.
Sure.
Guys, do we want to do this for the whole half hour, or do we want to talk about issues?
Well, I think this is
This is a
important.
pretty serious accusation.
Sure.
Okay.
FreedomWorks has developed voter education literature for decades and mailed each candidate running for seats in the South Carolina House and Senate a copy of the 2013 and 2014 South Carolina Legislative Issues Questionnaire. Fiscal conservative Mike Rowell received a perfect score in his responses, while his opponent DeSabato Jr. did not respond to the questionnaire at all. Instead, Mr. DeSabato had campaign representatives contact a super PAC intern who would have no knowledge of the 4C literature. We look forward to hearing. And I'll leave that with you.
Sure.
Well,
But the bottom line is that is their piece. They put that out. I had nothing to do with it.
Okay, well, I can respond to it in this way. I've received many questionnaires from a lot of different organizations. Some of them I filled out, some of them I haven't. But every single one that I haven't filled out was followed up with a telephone call and an email. I never received this. I never had an opportunity to answer the questions. I was never followed up with a certified mail, a registered mail piece. I never got a telephone call from FreedomWorks, and I never got an email from FreedomWorks. I contacted FreedomWorks directly, and they said they have absolutely no record of Mr. Rao being endorsed by their organization or having paid for the piece. If they paid for the piece, then let them come out and say they paid for the piece. This only states that he was mailed a questionnaire. It doesn't discuss anything about any follow-up conversations or having paid for the piece, despite the fact that it says right on its face that it was paid for by FreedomWorks. So I'd like to find out who actually paid for this piece, because that's a serious ethical violation if it wasn't paid for by FreedomWorks.
Okay.
And I'll just say that this, as well as other issues, I think the voters deserve somebody who's going to do their homework and not make accusations. Do the legwork. Figure it out before you throw it out in the press, because that's what keeps happening here. And if you want to run a fair campaign, do your homework.
I haven't thrown anything out to the press. This has been followed up by independent journalists on their own. I understand there's several different media outlets that are working on it. This was not fed to them by anybody. And the fact is that Mr. Rowell had stated that I had made negative accusations against him throughout this campaign. That's not true. All I've ever done throughout this campaign is to express the consistent servient leadership that I've had to my community, and I've juxtaposed that against Mr. Rowell's lack thereof. If that's negative, then I guess I'm negative. But all I'm doing is comparing the two candidates and showing their record of service to the community.
Dennis, to say you have not, I'm sorry, but to say you have not, the accusations of fraud, even though Johnny Bellamy stood up and said those were both her pieces of paperwork. The accusations of misreporting on my financial stuff, even though they were all done in accordance with what the ethics requires. There's several other issues out there. You make accusations about board of directors in Plantation Lakes, even though they're incorrect. So you
how is that incorrect, Mike? Explain to me, you ran for the board of directors of the Homeowners Association. You never served on the board of directors of the Homeowners Association. They asked you to be appointed to the board of directors, but you had to come into compliance with certain regulations within your community. We've discussed it with board members of the Plantation Lakes Homeowners Association, and you never served on that board of directors.
Guys, I'm going to stop this now. You had the last word on this, Dennis. You had the first word on it. We just spent about the first 8 minutes of this debate talking about that. Let's talk about the issues. I live in Carolina Forest. I'd kind of like to know where you guys stand on some of the things that I know that people who live in Carolina Forest are interested about. Let's go on from there and talk about that. Let's leave this stuff here. We're done.
I think that's important. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. First question I want to talk about, Interstate 73 may or may not be built. We've heard a lot about it for years. But in the meantime, we still have to get around Horry County, and Highway 501 cuts right through District 56. And everybody who lives in Carolina Forest at one time or another during a week or even a given day has to travel out on Highway 501. Sure. And you talk to just about anybody, they say widening's needed, flyovers are needed, different types of things are needed. If you're elected and you go to Columbia, will you fight to do something about Highway 501, or do you think we need to hold on and wait and see what happens with the future of I-73? Mr. DiSabato.
Well, I think both issues need to be addressed. I think that I-73 is absolutely critical to job development and job creation within Horry County. If you ask any job manufacturer, any manufacturing corporation that wants to relocate here, the first question that they ask is, where's the interstate? They want to be able to find a way to get, their products in and out of the community easily. 501 can be addressed by cutting the wasteful spending in Columbia and using that money to build infrastructure throughout the entire state. The Sun News has even reported to the fact that I've been critical of the Department of Transportation and not widening the roads on 501. But I think I-73 is absolutely critical. As you can see, Department of Commerce studies show you that 96% of all jobs created in the state are associated with projects that are located within 20 miles of an interstate. We don't have interstate access for 85 miles. If we want to be serious about job creation, bringing our unemployment down from 9.5%, bringing our underemployment down from 16%, then we need to get serious about getting I-73 completed and bringing jobs to this area.
All right. Mr. Ryle.
This is an issue that requires more than just I-73 or fixing 501. If we're going to bring jobs into the area, we have to make this a place where we can give the people that want to come in the workforce they need. We've got to deal with education. I mean, we have 40% of our schools in Horry County listed as Title I. There's a lot of problems out in the community. Our kids are graduating right now and there's no work here for them. So we need to start looking at what jobs are we trying to attract here and what are we doing to address the needs of the people that we want to bring in. So our tech schools, I went to a tech school for 2 years and that resulted in my first job. Once we start addressing what they need, then we need to make it easy for them to get their goods and services in and out of here in an easy fashion. I-73 has to happen. But the immediate need is 501. That's got to be addressed first. And it's not always going to be throwing another stoplight out there, another turning lane. Somebody needs to sit down and work this out from start to finish over the next 3 to 5 years. Where do we want to be? And in the meantime, keep pushing to get I-73 in. We need to alleviate the traffic on 501.
I'd like to rebut that for just a second, please.
You can have, say, just do it quick.
Okay, sure.
15, 20 seconds.
Not addressing 73 and saying that we need to do job creation is putting the cart before the horse. We do have an excellent education system out here, but we need to create jobs so that the students that we're training at technical schools, universities, are able to stay here in Horry County, and we want to be able to do that efficiently. And in order to do that, we need to attract manufacturers to the area. I-73 helps that.
Are you saying you want to see I-73 completed before 501 is addressed?
Well, I think I-73 will alleviate some of the strain that we already have on 501. If we can alleviate some of the commercial traffic and some of the tourist traffic off of 501, then we'll have an ability to use 501 as more of a commuter road, which is what it should be. And then if we can tighten our belts in Columbia and stop spending on wasteful programs, we can appropriate some of that money towards infrastructure projects like 501.
And I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying
you have the last word on this. We're going to move
Sure.
on to the next question. This isn't something for you to respond to.
Sure.
It sounds like what I'm hearing is you think the focus should be on I-73 before we worry about what's going on with 501. That's what I think I'm hearing.
I think I-73 is absolutely critical, and 501 can be addressed at the same time.
I want to keep talking about infrastructure, and this has to do with the other major road project is International Drive and extending that to Highway 90. That's supposed to start at the beginning of next year, but that was said 2 years ago. What can you do from Columbia to make that happen and make sure that that stays on the fast track to happening? And this goes to Mr. Ryle first.
Well, that not only has to be addressed in Columbia, but it has to be addressed here in the county as well. I think International Drive is one of the key pieces to alleviating the traffic on 501. If you look at the Industrial Park, Atlantic Center, Gardner-Lacey Road, there are opportunities to stretch roads across over to International Drive and create a grid there that will take a lot of this traffic out of this area. That would be one of my key places to start trying to get something done.
Okay. International Drive, Mr. DiSabato?
I agree with Mr. Rao. I think International Drive is very important. It does keep getting pushed further and further back. It's part of what I've done in the Civic Association. We not specifically addressing International Drive, but other projects within that community, they kept getting pushed back and back and back, and until somebody gave that community a voice, the needs of that community weren't getting addressed. Now, the latest issue with International Drive is Bear Bridges. So it sounds to me like an environmentalist problem, and if I go to Columbia, I'll help to alleviate some of that problem and fight to make sure that that our tax structure does take care of our local government so that they can address the needs that we have locally, build roads without adding a penny to the sales tax every time we need to do something like build a school or a road.
I want to get to the economic issue. Both of you have touched on it with 73, so let's maybe leave I-73 out of this part of the question a little bit. And you guys know District 56 has lots of different businesses. Both of you are business owners, and both of you own very different types of businesses. We have a college, we have manufacturers, but we also have a lot of empty land where I imagine a lot more businesses can go. What would you do, and what kind of businesses would you like to see locate in District 56, and how would you help them get here? And now we start off with Mr. DiSabato.
Well, I think we can do a better job at attracting manufacturers. I think we could do a better job at attracting technological corporations. I know that there's some work with call centers. I don't know that that's necessarily the type of job that we want to create in Horry County or Carolina Forest, but there's a vast amount of land west of the waterway that can be used for manufacturer development. And in order to bring companies to this area, we need to give them the ability to get their products in and out efficiently. And that's why I believe in I-73.
Mr. Ryle.
We've got a lot of work to do. Industrial production needs to come into this area. We cannot, I've raised 3 daughters, and my biggest concern is, one of the biggest concerns, when they graduate, where are they going to go? What kind of jobs are here for them? And we just don't have them. So manufacturing is going to have to be part of that. But again, I think that ties back to providing people with the skills, making sure that we can move goods in and out freely, which is going to include the structures we've already talked about. And I am a little concerned about the way we're currently doing it. The economic development packages that are going out need to be more open so we can see what's going on in those. They need to be more transparent. I think finding out after the fact that we're on the hook for whether it's $8, $24, $30 million, the figures are all over, and we start doing that across the state, we're building a trap we can't get out of. We're putting money at risk with no guaranteed results. I think our best solution there is going to be to adjust the corporate tax rates, get that down to where state people want to come to, make sure we have the workforce that can handle that, and make sure we have the infrastructure to move goods in and out freely.
Okay. I want to move on to some of the broader state issues now, and Governor Nikki Haley has had a contentious relationship with lawmakers, and you guys are no strangers to contentious relationships, but what do you like about Governor Haley, and what do you disagree with her on? Mike?
I believe Governor Haley is working very hard to create transparency in our legislature, what I think is absolutely necessary. I think trying to pull different agencies under her control is going to be very important. We can't have everything closed in right now. The Ethics Commission, for example, we're talking about reforming that. We've got a Senate, a House, and a state ethics. Why do we need 3 of those? So combining agencies, trying to get rid of all the administrative overhead. Government needs to shrink, and I think we need to take responsibilities back out here. And I think she supports that, and that's why I support her.
Okay. Dennis?
I also support Governor Haley's ethics reform. In fact, Mike echoed a few of the things that I've said out in the public about ethics reform myself. I do think that the House Ethics and the Senate Ethics and the State Ethics Commission can all be rolled under one organization. I happen to think it should be the Attorney General's office, and you could kill 3 birds with 1 stone by doing that. You're eliminating administrative waste. You're stopping the self-policing of ethics. And what you're doing is you're putting it underneath the banner of an elected official who has to confront the voters every 4 years. So if they're not happy with what's happening with ethics reform in the state, then they have an opportunity to rectify that situation. And I do think that Governor Haley's right with trying to pull some of the administrative agencies all under one banner. I think that if you look at our organizational flow chart compared to a state like Michigan, it's all over the place. And we need to taper it down, cut down on administrative waste, save the taxpayers some money, and help get things under the banner of one leader who has to confront the voters on a regular basis.
Here's one of those million-dollar questions. Would either of you vote to raise taxes under any circumstance, Mr. DiSabato?
I won't sign a pledge that says I will never raise taxes under any circumstances. I'm going to take a look at any tax increase and determine whether or not it's in the best interest of the community and the constituents which I serve. And if I think it is, then we'll work on trying to do it in a way that's as little harm and impact as possible.
Mr. Ryle?
As a business guy for the last 35/40 years, I don't care where I go, there's plenty of waste out there. And if we start addressing that, we can reduce our costs. And that works. That's a business model that has yet to fail. Go after the things you don't need to be doing. Get rid of the theft, the corruption, the fraud. We do not need new taxes. And I would absolutely agree to no tax increases.
Okay. South Carolina continues to rank really low among schools in the country, and some people would consider us a laughing stock of the country when it comes down to our schools. What would you do in Columbia to advocate better education, Mr. Ryle?
Well, as 48th in the nation, as far as our education system, we've got a lot of work to do. You know, things have broken down over the years, and I think the family structure breaks down. Then we put children in the schools that are struggling and having problems, and quite frankly, the teachers are all struggling now because before they can teach, they got to deal with discipline. And we've got to get into the school systems and work with the teachers and give them the ability to teach, to deal with children who shouldn't be in certain classrooms, and start restructuring that. I've talked to a lot of teachers about the fact that we should be testing children at the beginning of the year, and let's see where they stand, and start separating them out and getting them in smaller classrooms and then larger classrooms when they can handle it. And if we do that, I think we're going to empower our teachers to do a lot more and get a lot more done. Spending money on education, when it comes down to bricks and mortar, is not the way to fix it. It's getting involved with the teachers, with the education system, with the students.
Well, I think we need to be safe not to look at our education system in the state through the prism of Horry County, because Horry County schools do an excellent job. We rank well amongst the state, always in the top 3 amongst the state, and we fare well with the schools across the eastern seaboard. But with 1/3 of a dropout rate in this state and a 48th out of 50 in states when it comes to our education system, we need to do more to address some of the more rural communities in this state. One of the things that I would support is school choice legislation, put the decision of how students are going to be taught back into the parents' hands, because I do believe that education does start at home with the family. I also believe that we need to do more to cut down the administrative waste that's going on in the administration of schools and make sure that more money is flowing directly into the classroom to address the needs of the students and increase teacher salaries.
We've talked about the economy before, and I want to get back to the economy and luring business, not just to District 56, but to South Carolina, and this has come up in the state legislature. What kind of incentives should the state offer, or should the state offer incentives, and should it just be a level playing field? Dennis.
Well, if you understand about how economic development works in this country, every state in the country offers economic tax incentive programs to lure businesses to their area. If you're not offering reasonable tax incentives to companies to bring their industries into the state, you're just not in the game when it comes to economic development. Now, I think that reasonable means a tax incentive that can pay itself back within a 2 to 3 year period, broadens the tax base, increases jobs, and ends up increasing revenue for the state in the long term. If we can do that, and I think we could do a good job not only increasing revenue for the state, but also for putting people back to work that are hurting and struggling and need jobs. And I think if you ask the 115, 120 employees that were recently employed by Frontier Communications, they tell you they support tax incentives as well.
Mike?
Well, I think the people that have been working on this for years have very rarely come back with a solution that in 2 to 3 years paid back. And that's part of the problem with it. They're competing with other states. And in doing so, the other states are offering better packages and they're going elsewhere. I think we have to restructure that whole issue. Corporate tax rates have to be lower. Property tax rates have to be lower. When we pick and choose winners and losers, we're affecting the current businesses here. As a current business owner, if they're giving breaks, for example, from a 10.5% property tax to a 6%, and I'm still sitting here paying the 10.5%, I have a problem with that. It's a fairness issue. And so the people that came here and invested their money and their lives are not being rewarded for it, and we're asking people to come in from outside and hand them packages at our expense and at the taxpayers' expense. So I think the economic development packages need to be revisited. I think we need to look at a plan as a state that would make the state overall competitive, to where businesses come here not because we have to go bait them with packages, but because they know this is the best place to come to do their deals.
I just want to suggest that, I just want to make sure that I never suggested that we don't need to decrease our corporate income tax rate. I definitely think that the corporate income tax rate, all tax rates in the state need to go down across the board. We need to do a better job of tightening our belts in Columbia and stop wasteful spending. That way we can reduce our taxes.
All right. Well, guys, that leads us to our 1-minute closing statements. Mr. Ryle, we'll start with you. Give the voters your best shot at why they should vote for you. Actually, that's your camera right there.
I think this comes down to experience. I've been in business for 40 years in one fashion or another. And I've worked hard throughout the communities, regardless of where I've lived, to help the communities, whether it's been working with churches, civic organizations, schools, various organizations, and I've always given back to the community. I fought hard for those communities. I've raised a family. I've owned homes for 35 years, paid property taxes. And so as a business owner, as a person with great experience throughout corporate America as well as own my own business, I bring a lot to the table. And I'm basically retired at this point, so I have the availability to give you 100% of my time to serve you and serve this community. I'm not a guy starting out who's just starting his business, trying to grow his business, and going to be able to go to Columbia part-time. I can do this full-time. I'm committed to that.
Dennis DiSabato, 1 minute.
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is for the voters, when they're done watching this interview, I think you should go and do some research on the internet. Go to the Carolina Forest Chronicle, put my name in their search engine, see what comes up, do the same for my opponent. Go to this news station's search engine and do the same thing, put my name in their search engine and see what comes up and do the same for my opponent. I have a consistent track record of servient leadership to this community. I've worked hard in the Carolina Forest area to make sure that issues that were being ignored got addressed. I've been doing that for years. The fact is that Mr. Rao has not been around when I was doing any of that. I think back on issues like school realignment, Mr. Rao wasn't involved. I think back on issues like Conway Water, Mr. Rao wasn't involved. I do understand that he's done a lot in the community from a service perspective with regard to charitable contributions and working with faith-based organizations. I've done a lot of that as well, and I'll continue to work hard. And one last thing, I'm not married and I don't have a family, and that gives me the ability to devote 100% of my energy towards working for this community in Columbia. I will not be distracted by family obligations. Mr. Rao runs a business, so I'm not really sure how he says he's retired. If he's retired, then I guess he's not really doing such a great job at running his business.
All right, guys. Guess voters will have the final say on November 6th. Thanks for being here today, and thanks for keeping it relatively clean. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning at 9 for a last look at the 7th District congressional race. We'll show you some snippets of Tom Rice and Gloria Tinubu before voters head to the polls on Tuesday, November 6th. Have a great week.